My name is Julie Wedge. I am a political consultant. I'm self-employed, have been for years and years and years. I too will be honest, when Elena asked me to be on this panel, was not sure exactly how I was a woman in STEM, but slowly have discovered that that political science is a somewhat of a science. I mean, maybe a softer science, but we'll call it a science anyway. And I think that what the most important thing for me to express is a couple of things. First of all, as you've heard from all of the women prior to me, policy does not exist in a vacuum. So while we talk about climate change is structurally the problem, right? So everything relates to, right? We can relate public health to what's happening with the climate. We can relate transportation, education, housing, all of it relates to how we relate to climate and global climate change. Are we building transit-oriented development? Are we taking into consideration, how we reduce our own carbon footprint? But I also want to caution, because the power of resilience, you can get easily overwhelmed by the climate and the crisis and seeing what happens. I mean, I happen to live in California. I'm just outside of Sacramento, so I am, sort of immersed in the fires and the smoke from the fires and all of those things. And I know that it becomes a situation in which you want to be, and you do get fearful and anxious and all of those things. Resilience is about understanding that you are not alone. And resilience is about understanding that you can do what you can do, but it is also critically important to understand the difference between individual changes and capitalism changes, corporate changes. Corporations have a responsibility and a duty. And if they want to be considered people, as Citizens United decided that they were, then they have a personal responsibility to this as well. Working in the political realm, all politics is local. So I was really pleased to hear Molly talking about how, when she felt the overwhelm of everything that was happening, it was because she was looking at this from a global and even more specifically a national level. When she turned her focus to all politics is local, she found that is a specific place in which individuals can make large impact. So as a person that consults for your elected officials on a variety of public policy matters, climate change being one of them, I am completely reliant upon community to tell me how the impact is affecting them. But it is also my duty to talk to the experts, to recognize it's not, yes, I have imposter syndrome just like every other woman that is in a position to have imposter syndrome. So I do have that. But it isn't about imposter syndrome and feeling inferior. It's about a particular expertise. And scientists in climate change have particular expertise that has to be weighed differently than, right? It doesn't mean that it's weighed more than, it just means that it's weighed differently than. And so in the weighing of differently than, we know that the scientists are saying the world is burning. We know that this isn't a joke. We see the ice shelves and that still seems far away. But when we bring that closer to home, we have to listen to those scientists from that broad perspective and then bring it to a at home, how can we change some things here kind of perspective. And there's also the truth that science is looking at the science and not necessarily looking at the impact. And we need both of those things, right? So as somebody who's in the middle, who's trying to create public policy that both listens to the science, respects the science, hears what the scientists are saying, and is able to make a piece of public policy that directly mitigates that impact for community is where I live. So in saying that, my story is going to go back a few years when I was working for an environmental organization in Nevada that was working on the mercury regulatory process for the state. had to listen to the scientists, had to know that at the time, Nevada's mining industry in eastern Nevada was emitting 90% of the airborne mercury west of Texas. So I guess we're all just going to pick on Texas a little bit. But I mean, in this case, I'm not picking on Texas, I'm picking on Nevada. So we knew that that's just the science. That's the reality of some things, right? We knew that industry was responsible for that, right? It's clear, right? Smokestacks are happening, digging into the mining is a huge environmental impact. Have to work with governmental agencies, have to work with community, but also have to work with industry. So going back to what Elena said and what Gigi said, and really what all of the women on this panel have said, is that we can't hold ourselves to a particular standard. We can't push people out of the movement because they are talking to industry, or because they are working with industry, or because they are doing these things, because they have to be at the table. We cannot personal responsibility our way out of climate change. It's, I mean, if we could, then Gigi's conversation about how California took personal responsibility and avoided rolling blackouts, we'd have solved the climate crisis decades ago if we could personal responsibility our way out of this. We have to talk to those corporations. We have to talk to those big polluters. We have to do those kinds of major changes. And so the second piece of the story that let me finish the first piece of the story. We did, in fact, after a long, arduous process of bringing in community, bringing in elected leaders, bringing in the governor's office, and ultimately bringing in industry. And we fought it out, and there were successes, there were failures. We won, we lost. And in the end, we ended up having to bring it to the entirety of the legislature because community, industry, and electeds couldn't get it done without legislation. So those types of things are where we need to focus our efforts, right? If you want to yell at somebody, definitely yell at your elected officials, but do it in a way that brings, something to the table, saying that this is directly how this impacts me. This is what I'm experiencing in the midst of all of this. And we have to think about this. We have to think about global climate change from an intersectional perspective, especially as it deals with public health. We know that asthma rates are going to increase if our climate is full of wildfire smoke. I mean, these are things that we just know. I'm lucky and fortunate enough right now to work for a woman who in Oakland is working with the port and is working with industry and is working with all kinds of community and scientific leaders. She's a scientist herself, graduate from MIT, with a master's degree from Tufts in urban and environmental policy. One of the things that she just brought forward that is really game changing, and this is where I'm going to bring in Jasmine and the marketing, and the reason that this is important is because we have been screaming about this for a few years now. She's been working with Hyundai, and she's actually brought hydrogen fuel trucks to the Port of Oakland. While we are still fighting the conversation about a particular highway that goes through a historically marginalized area, to make those types of what most people would consider small changes is going to be incredibly enormous. The fight right now in the Bay Area is whether we put trucks on 580 or we don't put trucks on 580. And I'm going to tell you, the fight is between wealthy white people and those who are historically marginalized. So how do we create a public policy? How do we create a roadmap in which everybody feels like my road matters and the people on my road matter? And I think that one of the ways that you do it is you think outside of the box around different fuel sources for industry, right? Industry doesn't have to. Industry has enough money to structure themselves differently, far more easily and quickly than individuals do. It's difficult to pick up your life and move somewhere where you can reduce your carbon footprint. As Saskia just pointed out, right? As Jasmine pointed out, it's difficult as an individual to make those changes. It's really easy for industry to make simple fixes. One of the ways that we fixed the mercury regulatory issue in Nevada, we just asked mining to put filters on their smokestacks. $2 million. I don't have $2 million. I'm sure Elena doesn't have $2 million. I think most people on this panel don't just have $2 million to drop on a filter. But you know who does? The mining industry. And asking them to do something simple like that isn't and shouldn't be hard. Those doors should be open. They should be accessible. So find your local me, whoever that is in your area, and sit down and talk with us and tell us what it is that you want to do and how you want to get connected. And most of us actually know, I'm going to start this sentence by saying the system is broken. Doesn't matter which system we're talking about. Political system, environmental system, governmental system, all of the systems are broken. The incarceration system, it's all broken. And so the only thing that we can do, and the power of resilience for us, is that the only thing that we can do is fix it. So we have to get together. We have to have these conversations. We have to have this communication. We have to think outside of the box. I was talking to a friend just recently, and he was saying to me, well, it's capitalism and we're just going to have to figure it out. And I thought, how hilarious. It's the divine right of kings, and we're just going to have to figure it out. And so we think that these systems can't be, they're so huge and they're so overwhelming. But even small things like converting trucks to hydrogen fuel makes a difference. In my own house, in my own life, our air conditioning went out. Had a choice. Do I replace it with another air conditioning that has natural gas and those kinds of issues? Or do I replace with a heat pump and it's electric and I can run this with my solar panels and things like that? That's an individual choice that I made to go with a heat pump. But is that going to fix the climate crisis? No. But if we do things like put filters on smokestacks or switch over to hydrogen fuel trucks, those types of things will make very, very, very large impacts in the grand scheme of things. And I also want to echo what Molly was saying about the generational connection. This isn't about a generational divide anymore. We have to put that down. I know that this has been laid on us, and as somebody who's Gen X, and we always consider ourselves the middle child, and apparently we ate Gen Y. Because it didn't just go boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. There was a whole Gen Y, and apparently we ate them. So sorry, any Gen Yers out there that, but we are glad to have you. As Gen X, we were a tiny little generation, so we're doing two big ones. So welcome aboard. I'm happy to be XY. It works for me. It's all good. But I say that to point out the absurdity of what we discuss as a generational divide. This isn't a generational divide. This is a cultural divide. This is a rugged individualist divide. This is a mentality shift that we need to make, right? Again, I'm going to go back to, we cannot rugged individualist our way out of climate change. We are going to have to collectively make decisions. We are going to have to come together. We are going to have these conversations, and we are going to have to expect our elected officials to not just blow this off. And yes, that means that we have to be there all the time. And yes, it means that we have to spend our time and our energy and our treasure in doing this work. And now I'm going to pause, and I'm going to say, in the midst of all of this, know that you are not alone. Know that you do have a community. And when you are feeling that significant pressure that the world is going to end and the boomers are going to take the earth with them and capitalism is going to destroy us all, and when the weight of the world is crushing down on you, know that you can step away for a minute and do what Saskia was saying. Take a walk. Look at the things in your neighborhood. Find things that, I know it sounds simple because, again, you can't self your way out of any of this. But you're also not clear, not making good decisions, and expending too much of your personal time and treasure if you're exhausted. The movement needs you healthy. The movement needs you whole. The movement needs you at the top of your game. And sometimes the best way to do that is to step away from it. a day, a week, figure it out, whatever it takes, dance it out, sing it out, walk it out, smell the flowers, whatever it is that you need to do so that you can be whole in the movement. And so I am going to leave you all with policy doesn't exist in a vacuum. Please work with us. Please don't stay in your silos. Please come forward and talk to us. Your elected officials are elected to represent you. They are called representatives in a democracy for a reason, right? It's because we're not supposed to have to carry all of this. We're supposed to be able to trust that our elected officials are doing these things, are checking these boxes, are talking to the scientists, are talking to community, and are coming up with the best possible thing that we can do. And I'm also going to say this. Please don't ever think that policy is one and done. There are things called amendments. Make sure you utilize those too. If the policy that passed isn't strong enough, make it better. Don't spend your time, as some have done over years and years and years, chipping away at things little by little and taking those things away. Don't allow that to happen. Do your own chipping away. Learn from that and chip away in the positive. Add things to these pieces of legislation, because I'm going to tell you guys a little secret. It's easier to kill a bill than it is to pass one. And it is so easy to amend it once it's passed, because the big hoopla, the big resistance and support all happens with the passing of the bill. Once the bill is passed, you can say things like, there was an unintended consequence here and we need to shove this amendment in to make this better. So just know that there are those of us that are hearing you. We feel this. We probably feel an extra sense of guilt because we're clearly on the side of evil. But I do want to say, get out of your generational silos, get out of your personal silos. Feel the sense of urgency. As somebody who's 52 years old, I tell people all the time, I have more life behind me than ahead of me. And so that fierce urgency of now becomes a very real thing for a lot of us. But let's let that be an age thing. Let's let that be there is a fierce urgency of now thing.